Hey, Steve.
Yes, honey.
Why does a flamingo lift one leg?
I don't know why.
Because if it lifted both legs, it would fall over.
You get it, JP?
That's my joke.
So this is more Pen and Begone. Real talk about raising gamer kids. Everybody on this panel either has kids or talks about kids or both.
Or acts as a kid.
Or all three. I mean, that's just good times. So we're going to introduce our parental panelists. I'm Ben Farrow. I'm the editor-in-chief of superparent.com. Our website is dedicated to creating content that helps parents and their children make excellent choices around content. Things like YouTube, we talk about Pokemon Go, we talk about the kinds of games that kids could be playing but maybe shouldn't be playing. We talk about a lot of stuff on Super Parent. You guys can check it out. So I'm going to get my illustrious panel of people, parental panelists, to introduce themselves. I'll start with Mike here.
Hi, how's everybody doing today? How's your PAX? That's a lot of energy for 10 in the morning.
That's a lot.
So forgive me, I'm probably doing this speaking like this for much of the panel. Amanda and I are partners. We have 4 kids, and one of them, our oldest son, decided to give me a gift before we left. So I'm choking down cough drops and day.
You tell me this after you sit next to me.
I'll give you a smooch. You want a smooch?
I'm good.
Yeah. My name is Mike Futter. I am, among other things, the tabletop editor at Super Parent. I write about tabletop games and how we teach them to our kids. It's not just about the games themselves, but how we implement them at our table. I'm also the author of the Game Dev Business Handbook, and I'm a freelance writer. I write for other site, GameDev.biz.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, you didn't even talk about it.
I didn't even talk about the other website. I'm the editor-in-chief of 2 websites. We don't need to talk about me. Keep going, Mike.
No, I'm done.
Good morning, everybody. How's your PAX? Good? So I have a question. So why should Minecraft make a movie next summer? Because it'll be a blockbuster. So
now we're understanding why Steve's here.
I just confirmed that I am a dad. My name is Steven Dutzman. I am the founder of EngagedFamilyGaming.com. It's a website relatively similar to Super Parent. That's probably why Amanda and I know each other. And we write about video games and board games that families can play together. I've been doing it for about 6 years.
We even have a podcast.
We do, in fact. I have a podcast that I do with Amanda.
It's true.
So, yeah, that's it.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming out. My name is Karlyn, Meyer. I work in my day job. I'm an attorney working in legal education, but I also am the president of Chicago Nerd Social Club, which is kind of exactly what it sounds like, but we create very welcoming spaces for people to share their passions with others and find new things to love. Emphasis on the welcoming, and it's a very good, kind group full of great people. So,
can I join it if I live in Ottawa? Because I feel like
we have the internet.
Okay. My name is Dr. Rachel Kowert. I also received a gift from my children before I left, so sorry. I'm the research director of Take This. We are a nonprofit organization that provides mental health information and resources to the gaming community and the gaming industry. We're the first nonprofit to be formed to specifically service the gaming community, and we also run the AFK room, which is on the 2nd floor, room 251. If you haven't been there, you should go. It is the quietest room in the convention by design, which is how our clinical director describes it. All the coloring books, water, it's very nice. I personally have been studying games and gamers for the last 15 years, and a couple years ago I published a book called A Parent's Guide to Video Games, which I'm going to assume is why I'm sitting here right now.
I mentioned my name at all, but I did say it all. My name is John Phipps, and I help run a podcast called Superform Gamescast. And I am also the Take This Federal Local Coordinator this year. I'm also a streaming ambassador for Take This. And I have a 10-year-old son who, whenever he's down in my gaming room in the basement, I'm sitting in the big comfy daddy chair, and he sits in the computer chair and says, "Daddy, I'm your guy chair." So it's pretty awesome.
That's great. here to talk about video games and kiddos and raising gamer kiddos, but for whatever reason, over the many years that there have been video games, parents of video games don't mix very well. But why? Why is that the case? I mean, we're all parents, we all love video games, but the perception, especially among parents that don't play video games and their kids play video games, they don't tend to mix very well. So today we're going to talk about moral panics. And Dr. Rachel,
Yes.
can you tell me about what a moral panic is?
Yes, a moral panic is when we all freak out about new technology for no good reason.
That's the clinical definition.
That's the technical definition, yeah. So we've experienced moral panics every time there is a new technology that's developed and we're unsure about what effects it's having. So way back in the day, it started with crossword puzzles, and then comic books, and then radio. And
Wait, crossword puzzles?
Yeah, Satan speaks to you through crossword puzzles.
Do you know what the panic was? They were concerned it might make people literate, and that would be terrible.
Wow.
Yeah, that was it's actually, you can find old newspapers that say that.
I've got a mental picture now of some 1930s congressman screaming, "Not today, Satan!" Freud.
Yeah, no, it was
That's
really like that.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then Elvis. Oh, that was
Oh,
one
yes.
too.
Oh, that Elvis.
So today is video games. Today, the children.
That's right. So let's go take a walk down memory lane, because there are specific places where the video game moral panic started. Mike, you and I were talking about this morning. Where did this particular flavor of moral panic start for gaming?
I'm going to do Mortal Kombat.
Oh man,
Did I win? Did I get it right?
you get a gold star.
Awesome. Doom. Yeah, Doom's another one. Again, that had straight up demons in it. But every time that depictions of blood and violence showed up on a screen, I remember when I think I was in junior high. What year did
Mortal Kombat came out in 1993.
Okay, I was in high school when Mortal Kombat came out. I remember that there was a cabinet at our local large convenience store called Drug Fair, which, upon reflection, is an amazing name for a store. But it was the only place in town that really had a few arcade cabinets, and Mortal Kombat showed up there. And the parents in the town were freaking out, like, "Do you know what you can do in this game? You can rip somebody in half. You can rip their spine out."
It's
Now I just want to play it more.
It's just pixels, though, right? That's what video games are.
The funny thing is that Mortal Kombat got all the crap, but I don't know if you remember a game called Time Killers. It was a game where you could, in the middle of the match, hack off people's arms and legs. Everybody had a weapon. Then you'd hop around.
All right.
So really, this is now the Time Killers channel.
Bait and switch. No, it's definitely not. So that's where this flavor of video game moral panic started. Steven, you run Engaged Family Gaming.
I do.
Where do you think that moral panic has led us to today?
So, I think it's done a number of things. I think the big piece is, am I not picking it up?
You gotta be a
It's
little
okay.
bit
I've been
I should be friends with the microphone.
You should-
not right up on it, like about 6 inches away.
Thank you.
Microphone etiquette.
Thank you. So, I'm a host of a podcast. I don't know how to use a microphone. What do you? Don't judge me. It's 10:30. So, I think it's done a couple of things. I think the big piece is right now we're kind of in the middle of it. So it's just caused a lot of confusion and a lot of mixed messages because there are a lot of folks that don't know who to listen to because there are a lot of folks that have authority that are absolutely convinced that video games are contributing to quote unquote the downfall of society. And so I think those of us who do play games and our parents and some of us up here, it's kind of our job to help kind of carve through some of the bad messages, and that's kind of what I try to do.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's where I think it's taking us. It's just right now we're in the middle of confusion. I know eventually we'll get out of it, but not without help.
That's fair. I'm going to keep pushing this on down the panel. Karlyn, what does it mean for video games for parents? Like when you talk to other parents and you take your children to school, what are they talking about when it comes to video games? Are they panicking?
So largely, I kind of have two different sets of circles. Some are my nerd friends where, they're playing games with their children and they're engaged and they're very aware of what the games are and can kind of make the call about whether it's appropriate for their kid in terms of, violence or anything else, or even just subject matter intensity. And then there are the ones who are just like, what's that? What is the Fortnite? And with those,
We're getting there.
yeah, it's kind of a whole other conversation where, we're really starting from the basics. The biggest thing that I see that I think is a very valid thing to bring up is has to do with streamers. That it's less about what is this game specifically my kid is playing. It's more, who is the streamer that my kid is watching? Can I vouch for this person? Is this someone I would invite over to my home? Is this someone that if my kid were hanging out with them in the school, I would say, hey, the kid's got some pretty bad attitudes, some pretty bad ideas. That's the thing that comes up often that I wouldn't classify as a moral panic. I'd say that's a very wise, prudent thing to look into when it comes to your child in gaming, but it's kind of a separate thing.
I like that though, being able to draw that line between they're panicking unreasonably about a video game or video games in general versus, okay, maybe we need to have a conversation about YouTube and Twitch and streamers and stuff like that. And this content is it's true, that's John, I want you to weigh in on this. In terms of the kinds of games that you play with your son and the kinds of conversations that you're having with him on a regular basis, are you talking to other parents, that maybe aren't gamers? What are you hearing?
So I'm in kind of an interesting situation. Like most of my friends are gamers, right? So we don't really need to have those conversations because it's understood that we're going to let our kids play games and we don't see anything wrong with that. For me, it's more of a conversation with his mother. He lives with his mother. And she is very much not a fan of video games. She doesn't find any value in them. She's actually a childhood educator. And she has a very, very kind of, I guess you would say, puritarian stance on games. And so getting her to let him, for example, have a Nintendo Switch was a struggle. It was a fight with her. And so I had to sit down and actually dock a Switch and show her Super Mario Odyssey or Mario Kart and then tell her look, it's bouncy, it's an Italian plumber jumping on mushrooms, it's not really that bad. And so Fortnite was a struggle for her.
Yeah, I can imagine so.
And he's now racking 300 hours of Fortnite. And
respect.
Right, yeah. His Nintendo username is Elite Gamer.
Oh, that's perfect. I'm so proud of it.
Yeah, but getting to that point with her was she needed. It wasn't enough that I was. It wasn't enough for her or her husband that I was his dad. And I'm going to make a judgment. And I'm going to make the right call on this. We need to see physical evidence that this is not going to ruin him or corrupt him or cause him to become violent.
Oh, corrupt him. Okay.
I can provide that evidence.
Let's talk about corruption. Let's talk about Fortnite. Okay, that's not really corruption. So one of the conversations that I've had a lot of conversations with parents over the last several years, especially over the last year about Fortnite, is a lot of people are asking, why is my kid addicted to playing Fortnite? Is the first question. Usually I get this question from folks that don't really play video games or like, what is a Fortnite? That
2 weeks.
Yeah, no, exactly. 2 weeks of what though? It's a video game. And how do I get them to play something else instead? And I mean that is more of our situation of why is my kid playing so much Fortnite? Why is this a thing that we're constantly seeing in our households? And it's ubiquitous. We see it in every household, except for ours for whatever reason, because we're a Minecraft household. Kids just want to make stuff. They don't want to really blow stuff up. They want to blow each other up, but just that, because there's so many children in our household. So one of the things that I wanted to define is what Fortnite actually is beyond just a game, to give you a little bit more context about why kids are so focused on Fortnite. But I'm going to push it down the panel first, and I want to start with our big Fortnite players, because I know they have big Fortnite players in their households. I know that Steven has a big Fortnite player in his household. John, your son, is big into Fortnite. Who else's kids here are big Fortnite players? No, not in your households either? All right, we're going to let the dads take it. All right, dads. Let's start with Steven. Steven, talk about Fortnite and like why, I'm most curious about why it has become such a sticky game in your household.
I mean, I'll start
Yeah,
because it's objectively good, and anyone who says otherwise is lying to themselves. So I'll start with that. No, I mean that's the fundamentals is that it's a good video game. It's well made. It's fun to watch. It's fun to look at. And the other piece, and I'm sure John's probably dealing with some of that with his son. Well, we can fight about it later. The other piece is, for my son specifically, this is his opportunity to hang out with his boys, right? So
there's the kicker.
So it's a social thing for him. This is the equivalent of AOL Instant Messenger when I was a kid, or the playground. Yeah. So I mean, it's really just that. I mean, half the time they're really not even playing the game. They're just kind of messing around in menus and in chat. So I get so frustrating because I just want to watch them play. And I'm like, can you get out of the item shop?
Your kid's pretty good.
You're just going to keep accidentally buying stuff. Can you just play the game?
Wink, wink. Accidentally on purpose buying stuff.
Oh no, I bought this new picture.
Yeah.
All right, John, what about your son?
So, for me, you know what? Like, when I was a kid, in 1987, I was 7 years old. And it was always like, hey, come over and watch me play, DuckTales. That's DuckTales was my jam.
Yeah.
Chippendale was awesome there. But we didn't have, there was no multiplayer, there was no online connectivity. And this is the new playground. Like, this is, it's for kids like my son, or your kids, it's more than a game, it's a social construct. And they can play this and then talk about it the next day at school, and it becomes less of a game and more a way to actually hang out with your friends.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I can guarantee you, had something like this existed in the 80s, we would have had this conversation in 1989, because this is the new normal. Like that's how I describe it to my wife. Like I'm like, she's like, why do you think Jaden loves, like, and not just Fortnite, but Apex Legends is a big new thing.
That's the hotness.
I don't even think it's so much the game itself, but they're fun games. I think it's more like, I think it's more the social aspect of it.
I agree.
I think that's more important fundamentally than the actual games. Because when Apex Legends came out, it was like, oh, Fortnite, it's really cool. I got this new awesome thing now. It's a way to hang out with his friends.
Yeah, and that's something that a couple of books have really started talking about how these online spaces have become the new digital playgrounds. And we had those when we were younger. We had chat rooms, we had messengers, we had things like, I don't know, World of Warcraft. That was a good way to hang out with our friends that weren't even in the same city or even in the same country, or definitely the same time zone. So what's interesting about Fortnite is that it's reached across the age barrier, so that it's not just about kids playing, it's not just about parents playing, it's about intergenerational play. That's why Fortnite has become so sticky, and I think that is really wonderful. So I want to talk a little bit about game curation in our homes, and I'm going to start with Karlyn. I want to know how you approach curating games that you play either with your kids or you allow your kids to play.
Oh, great question. So this is definitely a thing. Every parent knows, the answer is your child. For my kid, one of her biggest triggers is if everyone is not together. So like if there's a party and someone leaves the party, that's like the worst thing that could happen. Even if that person is just, moving on, like leveling up or doing something different, everyone needs to be together. And so recognizing that like we need a game where just everyone's gonna come with. For example, the current one we're doing is Steven Universe Save the Light, if anyone has played that one.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and so that one you have this group of people, they're encouraging each other, and they're fighting and stuff like that. The violence, it's very cartoonish, but the violence is less of a thing. It's more of we need to have everyone together and everyone is encouraging and everything's cooperative. And so kind of recognizing that, obviously there are certain games where we might kind of turn the violence filter off if I'm playing, with my husband. But in general, if I'm playing something with her, I recognize that there needs to be some camaraderie with it, and that'll actually allow her to enjoy and kind of get into that space of exploration rather than kind of feeling low-key stressed about it. And so as she gets older, of course, there will be different things to consider, but right now it's very much, that's kind of the biggest thing to be concerned with, and from there she can have fun.
I like that. Rachel, how do you approach game creation in your home?
My daughter is 4. She loves all the PBS games, so that's
Those are
pretty
good
easy.
games, though.
They are good games. Daniel Tiger. But when I talk to parents about doing it in their homes, I talk to a lot of parents of teenagers, so they kind of curate their own, and the parents are kind of like, well, is this okay? Get a lot of questions about Fortnite. And my suggestion has become, I understand if you don't want to play games with your children. Not everyone wants to play games, I get it. But Twitch is amazing. And you can go to Twitch and you can look up videos of other people playing these games, and that'll give you the best idea of what your child is being exposed to, what kind of games your children are playing, what elements are in it, to make sure that's something that you want to allow to be played in your home. When I was a kid, those were my Darkwing Duck. Those were good. But my parents had no idea what we were playing. They didn't have these resources that we have now. It's more than just looking at the ESRB ratings. Like, we can really see, like, what is this game? How are they playing it? Are they all together? Is it violent? Is it not? And it would take just a little Google search in like 2 minutes.
And I want to add to that because it's just the same way we curate any other content. Like I love this website, Common Sense Media, because it's not saying, oh, your child is this age, they can't watch this, but just like, heads up, there's a little dog that's going to go missing. Someone might slap a child in the face, and it's just, I need to know these things are going to happen. So if I choose to watch it with my kid, we can, kind of hold her and talk to her at this moment, or maybe skip it. And so just in the same way that you would.
See, that's such a good point, because video games are held at like such a different, almost not standard is not the right word, but it's like, it's another form of media.
Right.
We just take the same steps, to curate, make sure they're watching something.
Absolutely. Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about how we approach, curating games in our homes, since we're both game journalists?
Yeah. So we have 4 kids. Our eldest is 15. We don't really have to worry about her.
She doesn't play video games except Fortnite, but even then, she doesn't.
And stuff on her phone. Every once in a while, stuff will show up on my phone, like free stuff that she's downloaded.
Oh.
So she plays a lot on her phone.
Got it.
We have a 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 6-year-old. The 10-year-old was, he's been challenging only because I made the assumption that because our oldest daughter, is extremely mature, that he would be able to handle certain kinds of content. And we let him play up to T-rated games with understanding like what he was playing. So there was for a while he was playing Overwatch. And he was playing Destiny, and it was an experiment that failed because I happened to notice on his account that he had been chatting, like sending text messages back and forth with somebody on PSN, and getting into it with somebody, and like starting to get really aggressive and angry. I'm like, that's it, you're done. There's no more online games anymore. You had the opportunity. I told you what the risks and rules were, and our rules are very simple. You don't give out your name. You don't give out your location. You don't give out your age. Your name doesn't communicate. Your username doesn't communicate anything about who you are. You do not voice chat, and you broke the rules. So
how do we approach it now?
So what we've done is we've really scaled things back. The kids are allowed to play E10 plus games, and it is a case by case on a T-rated game if we deem that it's something that all of them can play. Because it's not just about the playing the game; it's about the fact that if you're in a common area playing a game and the younger kids are around, we want to make sure that it's not just about playing; it's about exposure. And there are times when we're sitting in our office where we're playing The Division or we're playing other M-rated games.
Like when I was reviewing Home here.
Yeah. So we'll pause the game and we will say, "All right, what do you need? Is there something I can do for you? Like if they're moving in and out of the house, doing whatever, running into the backyard, and then we'll let them know. Like they'll ask, "What are you playing?" They're always curious about what are you playing. Not a game for you.
This game is inappropriate for your age level. I need you to leave. Also, I love you.
And
That's usually how that goes.
And they understand what that means now. There's no pushback.
No.
And we've gotten to the point where it's fairly seamless. Then the other big challenges that we have are dealing with multiplayer games, local multiplayer games, and how they play with one another. But that's just a general parenting thing.
Yeah, it's not really a curation of game thing. That's more along the lines of, okay, children, maybe don't throw things at one another in person.
Yep. But we're pretty comfortable with everything up to E10 plus. And then if there's a specific T-rated game that they've heard about from a friend, or they were over at a friend's house and saw, and they want to play it, we approach that on a case-by-case basis.
Awesome. All right, we're going to keep moving right along.
Good question. Yes?
So you mentioned online chat.
Yes.
And I'm very liberal with what my kids can play. And, you know, and talking to friends of mine, trying to create the paradigm shift that video games are in fact educational. They do add a lot to a child's life. The chat stuff is
That doesn't usually.
it doesn't.
I mean,
I don't, like, I will not let my kids do that because I'm like, I don't know what these individuals are saying to you. I don't know what type of impact psychologically, because it, you know, you can experience bullying and all sorts
Oh,
of ways.
absolutely.
So the concept, like, I'm like, no, absolutely not. And as a very liberal parent, that's really hard to do.
I can feel this one.
So, okay, yeah. Well, I'll let Steven take a crack at this because I know that his kids play a lot more online games than mine do.
I think the first thing is that it's okay to say no. You know, like, so I want to reinforce that. Like, if you're feeling, you know your kids better than I do. First off, I support you. If you want to say no to voice chat, go ahead. I think, you know, my son is 10 and he got a headset for Christmas from someone. You know, and so we obviously want to let him use it, right? So what we have encouraged him to do is make connections with friends at school, with friends at Boy Scouts. And so the rule we have is voice chat with your dudes. And if you, or your, you know, and the rule is, if I see you in a group and your voice chat is on, I'm going to walk up to the television and I'm going to point at the usernames and you have to tell me who they are. And if you can't say it's Jose from Boy Scouts and Jose's cousin or whatever, like if he can't say specifically who they are or how they are related to someone that I know, then I just turn it off. And with the Switch, it's super easy because I can just take it out of the dock and put it in my pocket and leave. And he gets real mad when he's like in the top 15 and I'm like, are you chatting with this guy? And he's like, I don't know. And I just yeet it into my pocket and get out. So that's admittedly, that's a unique concept. The Switch allows us to like completely shut down games in a very easy and comical way. But I mean, any other way, if that's how I do it, and I think that opens it up, so they still get to use the voice chat. They still get to use their fancy headsets, and it means that you don't have to listen to children talking on voice chat through your television, which any of us could just imagine it. If you've never done it, it's the worst, and it's just so bad. I'm sure they would feel the same way about listening to me. I'm sure they do actually feel the same way listening to me. But that's my advice. And then that gives them the experience without the general public is the worst. But
yeah.
Are you familiar with Apex Legends? It's a recent. Okay. So one of the things that's great about that game is that it has served a number of communities with what it's called the ping system, where you don't actually have to be on voice chat in order to communicate effectively with your team. So, and I know that I believe Epic integrated a ping system into Fortnite recently.
Kinda. It started. I mean, give it a few months. Give it a few months.
So there were two different reasons why this kind of surfaced as a really great thing. The first one is that women take a lot of crap online, and it allowed women to jump into the game and not have to get on voice chat and immediately suffer abuse. Use the ping system. You can play. Nobody's going to bother you because they're none the wiser. And then for accessibility purposes. But it's great for kids because it's like, no, we don't want you on voice chat, or you've lost the privilege of voice chat because you violated our rules. You can still play the game and be effective in the game using a ping system. So I hope that we start seeing that integrated in more games because it serves multiple communities and serves multiple functions. It's a great quality of life inclusion, and I'm hoping that we start seeing it.
That's great. All right, so this is like overarching. I think that everyone on the panel can agree that this is the way that we approach, is leading with understanding and making sure that this isn't about definitively saying, no, you can't do this. Well, why? Because I said so. You know, it's about creating conversation around content and making sure that we're, enabling our kids to make a decision. So I want to talk about screen time for a quick second. I don't want to go too deep into this, But I want to talk to Rachel specifically. Rachel, can we talk a little bit about screen time? Does it really matter how much screen time my kid has?
We need a longer panel.
I know. Can you wrap it up in like a paragraph?
Okay, short version.
TLDR.
Yeah, exactly. So people like to talk about screen time as like this overarching thing, and there's a really good analogy that Andy Shabilsky, who is the head of the Oxford Internet Institute, he always says, like, with eating, we don't talk about like food time. Like, why are we talking about screen time? We can do
I want to talk about food time.
Well, I mean, I'm all about food time, but yeah.
Food time.
So TLDR, no.
That's great. That was amazing.
No, it really doesn't matter. It's what are you doing with the screens? It's how is it being integrated into your daily life? Is it one of many activities? Am I Skyping with grandma and am I playing Fortnite and I'm checking my email? It's very, from a scientific standpoint, it is completely unfruitful to talk about screen time. And if you see an article on Variety about screen time, just don't read it. Don't read it.
Variety. Michael, stop.
I don't know why I picked Variety. I like Variety. If you see an article in
It wasn't me.
It wasn't you?
No, it was Brian. I know which story it was.
Okay, all right. Well, so I do want to talk like a teeny tiny bit about how we govern screen time and like video game time and how we play video games with our kids in our households. I'm going to start with John. So John, how do you govern and approach screen time with your son?
Well, I am in some ways grossly irresponsible in many aspects of my life.
Perfect.
So
Thank you for being so candid.
If I could play video games all day with my son, I would. But my wife, who also plays games, is far more responsible than I am. And
Vicky's a good egg.
Vicky is, yeah, anyway, she's far superior to me in many aspects. But she, we worked out a system where, now that James 10, he's gonna be 11 in April. He wakes up before we do, and which I'm like, fine, whatever, feed the dogs and it's all good. He's got an Xbox in his room, and so he plays, Apex Legends. We say you have 2 hours in the morning to play Apex Legends. Do whatever you gotta do, just keep it down. And after that, we're gonna go out, we're gonna do a few things, we're gonna socialize a little bit. You can have 2 more hours in the afternoon, and then at 8 o'clock, if you don't want to hang out and watch, movies with mom and dad, you can go upstairs and play more Apex Legends. We don't put restrictions on his Switch, really, because that's more of a pick up, play 30 minutes, and eventually, he's good enough where he's like, okay, I'm done with that now. I can move that aside and
That's great.
do other things. But we install that in him at a very, very early age. So he's extremely good about saying, okay, I'm done now, no problem. I can put all the controller and I'm not gonna raise a fuss about it because I know for a fact that I'm going to get to play later. Basically what we've done is we've instilled in his mindset that if I'm good about putting down the controller now, I get to play later, and that's better than being bad about it and not getting to play at all for the rest of the day.
Absolutely.
So we reward his playtime with more playtime.
That's great. Karlyn, how do you approach it in your home?
So since I still have a kindergartner, something that's really important for our screen time is the use of subtitles. They're great for everybody, all the time. So anything that we're watching, that we're playing, that we have subtitles on it. And my kid became literate so quickly, and I swear this is a large part of it. We read together too, but every screen always had words on it. We also sometimes, we play around with like language and stuff like that. Like if there's good, voiceover localization options. We're going to play this in Spanish now, and we can still have English subtitles. So you're either going to work on Spanish or you're going to work on reading. So just try to it's me probably trying to justify screen time to myself, but it works. So that's just a little thing we like.
That's
to do.
amazing. I should start doing that. Okay, but we're going to talk a little bit about how we handle screen time in our house. Do you want me to?
You can kick it off. You can.
I told the last story
You told the
about,
last story.
about how I screwed up. So I think it's important that we admit our parenting mistakes because we've made a number along the way. Experimentation. Is this thing going to work for our kids? No, it doesn't work. How do we fix it? How do we find the right balance? I'm really happy with the balance that we found. Again, it's kid by kid, family by family. I'm really happy where we landed, but it did require some experimentation. And that means there was some failure, and understanding where those failures came from is important. So don't be afraid of your parenting failures. Embrace them, learn from them.
It means you're trying. So how we approach screen time in our home, especially with our three youngest kids, is it is really structured. We've found that if we let them make those decisions for themselves at this point in their lives, the 6 and 7-year-old especially, it doesn't go so well. I mean,
Vivian turned into
we'll get there. We'll get there. We can potentially talk about like where some of the things that we experimented with, where things went really sideways. But how we approach it now is the kids get a specific number of hours of non-interactive screen time. So like to hang out and watch a movie or watch television shows together. They have a prescribed amount of time where they can play interactive games together or separately or whatever. We have so many consoles. The benefit of living in a game journalist household. So many consoles. And they also have educational screen time where they sit down and they play cool games like math games and spelling games and stuff like that. And that's been a good, successful. Or they code. Well, that's education.
right, but
Yeah. So
but
that's
it's like it's not so much so we separate that educational screen time into anytime they're in front of a screen where we make them justify this to us. What are you learning from this? Like what do you think you're gonna get out of it?
Yeah. So, and that's creativity time for the kids too. So they can sit down and like paint cool stuff and make cool little programs and apps, and it's really fun for them. And we don't really govern educational screen time. They're making stuff and cool.
They do have to request it.
They do. They have to say like, hey, can I go have educational time? And we're looking at our watches and we're like, oh, it's been a couple hours. Maybe I should go check on them and see what they're doing, see what they're making. But yeah, that's how we handle screen time in our house. Steven, how do you handle screen time in your house?
I think it depends on a weekday versus a weekend.
Us too, for sure.
So on the weekends, I mean, it really is just dependent upon our schedule, and to a degree, it just gets unfettered, especially if it's just easier. But during the week, we recently experimented with using video game time specifically as a reward. Nope, we really don't watch a lot of TV, or movies for that matter. So we use video game time as a reward. So if you do your homework correctly, not just throw words on the page just to get it done, and if you get your chores done, then you get to follow it up with doing some screen time, specifically video game time. And we found that that's been productive in the last couple of weeks. Before that, it was just a mess. And a lot of that's just it's hard to quit Fortnite when you're in the middle of a match. So we're learning.
Yeah.
It's been an evolving process.
That makes sense. Rachel, do you have anything that you want to add for how you handle screen time in your home?
I think clear boundaries is you can't. My daughter would watch YouTube all day. We no longer have YouTube on the iPad, just all day. Yeah, and I think you have it right. Like it's separate. That was what I was saying. Like not all screen time is created equal. You can have more screen time if you're learning spelling, sure. But that's enough of the YouTube. That's enough Blippi. Oh God, I can't handle it anymore.
That's good. It's an important thing to remember. So the whole thing that we're trying to instill here is that like our goal needs to be that we need to instill healthy habits that are going to last, and it's not going to be about you can't play this game or you can't do this or you're only allowed to do this. If we don't have these kinds of conversations, they're going to leave our homes. They're going to go out into the real world and they're going to be like, I have so much screen time now. What do I do? How do I do this? I have no idea.
It's the screen time version of the freshman 15, which I beat twice.
This guy. Which means we can't be rigid. So we have to constantly be questioning what is good for our kids, what's good for our families, what's right for the moment that our kids are in, and that's in terms of their age, that's in terms of their maturity levels. What's good for our eldest daughter is not good for our youngest chaos ball. Otherwise known as our youngest daughter. So, I mean, yeah, we constantly need to be pressing those boundaries. But we're going to talk about what's and I'm interested. All right, who wants to start? You want to start with Viv?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay, we're going to start with Mike and our wall chaos.
So there was a time when we were getting settled in, and Viv didn't have a whole bunch of toys available to her. We got workbooks for her, but ultimately it came down to the iPad and YouTube. And she was on YouTube Kids nonstop. And
This is before I knew the perils of YouTube Kids.
Yeah, that's a whole different panel now, isn't it?
That also was at superparent.com.
I should go read that story. It's a good story. So what we noticed was she was, it became a teddy bear, essentially. It became a security blanket, and anytime we tried to remove that from her.
And it's because partially, she was away from her brother. She was away from, our home in Canada. So, it was a new setting. She's like, well, I have this thing that's mine.
She wasn't in school yet.
She was not. She was 4. So, we're like, I don't know. We just want her to be happy. How do we? Okay, we'll just let her be happy.
No, she wasn't happy. I mean,
she was not happy.
It really turned into, because we were working, and it turned into, degrading behavior and attitude and snapping at us. Like Dad, when I was a kid, when we got our NES, I would play that thing nonstop, and my parents would be like, all right, you need to go do this, and I would get grumpy with it. I'm like, I have a Nintendo attitude, which I'm sure Nintendo would absolutely love. But, so we used to jokingly recall what was going on, and Phipps not the only one of the kids who ran into this. Our oldest son, Paul, did too. We jokingly called it Nintendo attitude, but that's what it was. It was like this.
My brother suffered from that too when we were little.
Yeah. So we went through detox. Like we made her quit cold turkey. We took the iPad away for.
It was for a
month.
It was a month. She wasn't allowed to touch it. She wasn't allowed to even know where it lived.
Yep.
She had to completely forget about its existence because she was exhibiting addictive behaviors and patterns, and it was really, really troubling. So that went horribly wrong.
For the
But
first
then it went beautifully right because we were able to kind of segue into how we approach, their screen time now with devices and interactive screen time versus non-interactive screen time versus education.
Yeah. So it was only about a week though where things were kind of rough, and then after that she forgot about it and she started doing other things. And she found other things to do. So when we reintroduced very slowly, very methodically. Again, this is what I'm talking about. It's like you need to make these mistakes sometimes in order to figure out the best way for your individual kids. Every kid's different. Every family's different.
Absolutely. So let's keep going down the line. Steven, where have you gone wrong?
I don't make mistakes. No, I'm just kidding. You know what? Oh man, of course I do. Just look at me. The biggest one, and this is something that I run into a lot, because we have, I love games. I play games, and I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. And the issue that I run into, and this is a thing that we've kind of encountered, and I'm still in the process of trying to figure it out, is that there are games that are appropriate for me and for my 13-year-old to play or talk about or consume content about, that not so much for our 10-year-old. And trying to figure out how to strike that balance is a real challenge, especially when they're so close, right? And because they really are, best friends. And so to be like, all right, Evan, that's my oldest. You know what? You're at the point where I think it's cool for you to play Assassin's Creed. Which I'm getting there. He's convincing me because he loves ancient Egypt. And so I'm like, maybe, he's trying to sell me on it. We don't own it yet. But
Play around and discovering.
Yeah, there's the museum-ish.
What is that? Yes, I do.
We'll talk after.
That was 100% sarcasm. Of course, I know about discovery mode.
You wily.
Everything I say is sarcasm to you guys. So that's the mistake that I've been making, and that's what's going wrong, is because we keep talking about it and leaning into it, and then his younger brother's like, well, all right, I'm in. I want to kill some dudes. And I'm like, so I think, and so that's the big challenge, and the biggest mistake is kind of leaning into that, and I think a little bit earlier than I probably should have. And so I'm finding a way how to like back myself out of, kind of stepping in it. My wife was not pleased when she found out that Evan and I were conspiring to allow him to play. I guess the other piece is you should talk to your partner before you make significant gaming decisions. So I'm learning, but I mean, nobody's perfect, right?
Nobody's perfect. That's why we're talking about this. We want to be able to share some of the things that we've learned. So, Karlyn, what kinds of mistakes have you made so far with regards to like video games or screen time? Where have things gone horribly wrong, but you fixed it?
So far, so good. Not to say that I'm a perfect parent, just, we've had challenges in other areas, but this has been pretty smooth, so I'm going to pass this to Rachel.
Well, when I talk to parents about what's going on, and the example I just gave about my daughter, untethered access tends to be the #1 issue. I'm concerned my kids play too many video games. So what are they playing? Well, I don't know. I'm concerned of who they're talking to. Who are they talking to? Oh, I don't know. Okay, well, let's tether in the access. So my daughter can watch YouTube on the television, but she cannot have YouTube on the iPad. Your children can play any game they want, but they cannot talk to other people, or you limit them to people that they know. It's about, you have to have some boundaries, just like we have with any other media that we consume, or our children consume. I think that's been the #1 issue that I've heard. It's just, well, they play all the time, and I don't know what they play, and I don't know who they play with. It's like, let's at least put it in a little bit of a box, and then we can move on from there.
I like that. What about you, John? John's got stories.
So, Super Mario Party, right? Here's the Super Mario Party on Switch.
Yeah.
Super wholesome, right? Just a wholesome experience for everybody involved.
It's never like that, you know it.
Super Mario Party is the game that made Vicky and I realize that we spent so much time teaching Jake how to be a good loser. We hadn't really put any emphasis on teaching him to be a good winner. And so, and there's a dual lesson here. One, teaching your kid to be a good winner, and also teaching him that certain gestures aren't what you think. So we're downstairs playing Super Mario Party on the big screen, and he wins. We had just the previous day we watched Avengers Infinity War. There's a scene in the movie where Peter Quill puts a bomb on Thanos' back, yells boom, and then throws up what I like to call the big old freedom rocket. And goes backward into a portal, right? My son has no idea what that gesture means. He just thinks, oh, I won. So, he wins Super Mario Party, turns around to my wall, yells, boom! And then throws out that big old double freedom rocket. Oh no! So he looks at me, and all of a sudden he sees Sergeant Phipps, U.S. Marine Corps, start to happen. He immediately burst into tears because he saw the look on my face. And then he looks at me, she goes, "Oh no!" And so she got me like this, and instead she says, "Jaden, let me tell you why we don't do that." And I'm just like. And she says, go out of the room. And so she sends me out of the room, and I can hear Jade in there, I didn't know what it meant! and she calmed me down, and she handled it the right way. I was about to make him scrub every toilet in the house. But the lesson there was that, it's not just teaching your kid to accept defeat gracefully, it's also teaching your kid to win gracefully as well. And also, when you're watching Avengers Infinity War, tell him, what Star Wars just did, don't do that.
I constantly drink.
That's not a celebration, son.
Don't do it.
I think we can all agree that everything that Star-Lord does is something that you should not do.
I'm not gonna lie though, there was a small part of when it happened internally that was like
That would have been all of me. Like, whoa.
Looking back on it, it's great. But
I think I would have rather he flipped me off than T-posed in my face. I'm just so done. I'm just done with the T-posing to assert dominance in my house. It just drives me insane.
I would have rather just floss.
You know what? Flossing's fine. It's fine.
They they understand that if they floss at me, I floss in public.
Oh, no,
in front of them. That's how I handle that.
Why? It doesn't make any sense.
No, it's perfect because your shoelaces. I guess, I don't know. I was just playing. Anyway, So point being, so one of the things that I'm constantly doing as someone who runs a website that's mostly for non-gaming parents is I have to talk to them all the time about video games because they have so many questions. Our jobs, our collective jobs as parents, as members of the gaming community, to talk to non-gaming parents and help them. Because honestly, the only way that we are going to prevent these big, sweeping moral panics is by providing knowledge and helping them to better understand what games are, why they're important, and why their kids are so interested in playing Fortnite or Minecraft or Apex Legends. I'm so bad at Apex Legends. Another thing to remember is that games often grow with our kids. Minecraft is not it's not the same game that I played in my early 20s. It's not. It is completely different. Fortnite has changed more over the last year than a number of games tend to over a lifetime. Roblox has changed. Heck, Neopets was around when I was a teenager. It's totally different now. So one of the things that I want all of you to take away with you today is to think about, what your kids play and how those games have grown with them as your family has matured and gotten older. And maybe even looking into the future about how things will continue to change and grow over time. And we have 5 minutes for questions. And you can line up right here and we'll answer your questions for 5 minutes. And if we don't get to it, we'll be out.
Can I add one thing also?
Of course.
That's all right.
Yeah.
So kind of going back to the question that you had asked during the panel about, or the comment about turning off the chat, and something that's kind of come up earlier. So I think it's really important that whatever decisions you're making about your kids' gaming, that you're talking to your kids about those decisions. And you're explaining, this is why I've said you can't play this is why. And especially when it comes to if your kids are watching streamers, if your kids are chatting with people, explaining what is the concern that I'm getting at here. It's not just because I don't want you to watch this, it's not just because I don't want you to have a good time talking to people, but actually explaining what it is that you're concerned about. We have a line of people, but I think that's something that's really important to get your kids on the same page about.
Cool, all right.
That's a good point.
I don't know.
That's fine.
Just yell over the top.
Yeah, I'll project. This is fine. So I actually had I kind of wanted to share 2 super quick tips that I've come up with.
Sure.
One thing that we did, we have a rule in our house where you don't say or do things that you don't know what they mean. So my son really started swearing a lot after YouTube, and so I was like, do you know what that word means? And he was like, no, I do not. And so I was like, then we don't say things that we don't know what they mean. So that's a quick tip. And then the other tip is just in terms of what kinds of media, we are doing media food groups. So they're learning about food groups in class. So I was like, YouTube is a sometimes food. So different kinds of media are, we equate to different food groups, which has been really good for him. He's in kindergarten. Yeah, so that was kind of the way that I navigated that issue.
Can we talk? I would love to talk to you about this after the panel because I'd love to hear your theory and maybe write about it and talk about it.
Totally. I'm super happy to talk to you about that. But I also had a question. My son's on the spectrum, so he's special needs. Having a schedule is really, really good for him. Having rigid lines is really, really good for him. But I was wondering if you guys had any other tips in terms of, because he can really hyper-focus on a specific game or a specific thing. Do you guys have any tips on how to maybe have him reach out or how to navigate that special needs?
Sure, our oldest son is similar, where he will play a game and that will consume everything. So when it's Minecraft, he's reading Minecraft books, he's talking about Minecraft, he's mapping out stuff about Minecraft. Every conversation is about Minecraft. Pokemon?
Yeah.
We had that one too.
I know grown-ups like that.
720 now, and he knows all of them.
And yep, so it's kind of the same thing. So what we've started to do, because he is in ADHD land on the spectrum, with what works with him is we make him aware of it. Hey, You know, we've now had 2 conversations about Minecraft today. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about what happened in school today. What are you doing in math right now? What are you doing in science right now? And just try to gently steer the conversation in other directions. But making him aware, like, hey, you are perseverating on this. Like, this is all you've talked about today. And I love that you're enthusiastic. I'm so glad you're having fun with this. And let's find some other things to talk about. And we've managed to do it in a way that it doesn't make him feel bad. But it is something that we generally need to bump up against when he does it.
So my parents are super anti-video game, and I'm actually here, like, listening on their behalf. I want to know, well, because they don't want to come to video game land.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
I mean, listen, if you don't like video games, PAX is your nightmare.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you guys know of any resources that I could, like, point them in that
Come
direction,
here.
like books, for example.
Here.
Seriously.
Give this to your parents. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Also, have to listen to Super Parent.
Yes.
Yes, yeah. Come in and hang out on Super Parent. You can send me emails. Or you can tell them to send me emails. I don't know when I get back to them since they're on anymore. But I will get back.
We can probably take one more.
Yeah, we can take one more question and then you guys can come and hang out with us outside and we'll talk to you guys for a little while.
Me and my husband are gamers. Our girls like to play games. Our second in kindergarten. My concern is when reality hits your world. And for instance, my example is we live very close to Parkland, and that put a whole new spin on my views on gaming. Even though I logically understand gaming and we have open conversations about things and stuff like that, my concern is that my second grader who's starting to become interested in Fortnite, that's a whole new reality for me, and I'm having a hard time just kind of letting her move into that.
Can I take that one?
I would love to add to it. Please go ahead.
Sure. So I'm somebody who has real-world experience with violence. I'm a combat veteran, and I've lived through 7 different combat deployments. And what I've learned is that, we always hear the argument, I'm worried about violence in games. I'm worried about the effect that it has on my child going forward. What I have, and I'm not a psychologist by any means, but what I've learned is that, I'm not going to sit here and hit with why I play these games growing up, I'm fine. Right? What I will tell you is that I've lived through these scenarios, and I can still tell right from wrong. And it's a difficult thing to trust our children to know right from wrong. But I don't let my kid play Call of Duty yet, not because I think it's going to harm him, but because as somebody who has been involved in situations, the act of killing, whether it's in real life or in video games, is not something to be taken lightly. And at 10 years old, I don't want him to be able to process that yet. But I don't think it's a matter of these games are going to actively cause something to snap, or I'm not sure if that's what you're worried about, but
It's more of like I don't know if it's the right word for it, but desensitizing. Like they go through the drills at school, and they talk about it at school, and I just don't want to take away from it, but I also don't want her, just to not let her see it. So it's just a struggle for me, because it's an emotional struggle. I understand logic. It's the emotional part I'm having a hard time.
we are a parent. There's it's 90% emotion and 10% logic.
So Karlyn, you said that you had something that you wanted to add to.
Yeah, I just really want to validate what you're saying right now, because you're speaking kind of to the health of your whole home right now. There's some things that are probably a trigger for you as a parent, and things that you think could potentially be a trigger for your kids. And also, like you're talking about this desensitization of it. I would really just emphasize having those conversations of, this game makes me sad because it reminds me of something that happened in real life. And it doesn't mean, this is exactly the same, but we talk about that of there's a war that's happening, or there was a riot in France, or, there was actually a car accident that I saw that made me really sad. And being able to talk about that, it contextualizes everything. It contextualizes you as a person, the things happening in the world, and the media, because they're all wholly integrated with each other. So I would really just encourage you to have those conversations. And it doesn't mean that the answer is therefore, yes, we play it, no, we don't play it, but just we have to talk about how this makes people feel. It's not just a game. Nothing's ever just a game.
And I agree completely with you. I'm not saying like your children, you know what your children should play, but from a scientific point of view, zero evidence of desensitization. The brain is amazing at knowing what is real and what is not. Watching Rambo versus being Rambo. Totally different experiences. Totally different experiences, truly. And there have been literally thousands of studies, thousands, about the effect of violent games, and it has no impact on real violent behavior. But this is an emotion. I cry at car commercials as a parent. I know this is an emotional decision, but from a scientific perspective, the influence is zero.
And your emotional decision
Thank
is
you very
perfect.
much.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Engage, a family gaming podcast.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. Tune in next week.